somewhere along the way, we stopped teaching men how to be strong. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. In a culture that fears conflict, strength starts looking like a threat. It starts looking like toxicity. And a man who asserts himself, who says no, who sets boundaries, is seen as a problem. But I don't think that the result is more peace. It's more confusion, more resentment, more passivity. And underneath all that, more anger. But push it down, it comes out sideways. Passive aggression, self-sabotage, bitterness, gossip, slander, even violence. So we've got a generation of young men who were taught to avoid their power. The problem is, when a man becomes disconnected from his power, that doesn't by default make him peaceful. He often either becomes obedient or explosive. Instead of becoming strong, they become angry or numb, or both. This video is about why every man needs a dark side, not to become dangerous to others, but so he can no longer be made a victim of those who are. And I'm gonna teach you practically the process of how you can do that. My old boy Carl Jung, he's the OG. He originally coined the term shadow to describe the unconscious parts of us that we suppress and deny. He wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." He also said, and I thought this was quite cool, "How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole." That's a cool metaphor right there. Literally, in order for something to exist physically, it has to cast a shadow. So to be substantial, you got to have that dark side. Jung believed that the goal of life wasn't perfection, it was wholeness. And wholeness means integrating light and dark. If you don't face your shadow, you project it. You blame others for the things you refuse to see in yourself. This is how wars start. This is how relationships end. But if you can face it, you can transform from the inside out. Strength without direction is chaos, but kindness without strength is not a virtue. Just because you can't bite doesn't mean that you're a good person. It's the same thing as like, if you can't fight, then it doesn't make you a peaceful person necessarily. What makes you peaceful is the ability to fight, but choosing to walk away. That's keeping peace. So the shadow isn't evil, it's just raw potential. It's the part of you that can protect your family. It's the part of you that can speak uncomfortable truths, to walk away from toxic relationships, to push back against injustice. It's almost like your yes is your sword and your no is your shield. Your no is your boundaries. When men stop saying no to disrespect, to manipulation, to tyranny, everything begins to fall apart on a personal level and on a societal level. If our nations were built up of strong, virtuous men, many of the atrocities taking place throughout history might not have ever gone down that way, because enough people stood up and said, no, we're not doing this, because it's a tiny few in power. And if enough good people stood up and said no, what could they do? What resistance could they actually put up to the force of a whole nation doing that? Who really wins when good men stay weak? There are people in this world who thrive on the exploitation and manipulation of the weakest among us. They thrive on control, on dominance, of exploiting the people that can't do anything to stand up against them. In psychology, we call these kinds of people the dark tetrad: Machiavellianists, narcissists, psychopaths, sadists. In fact, it was being in proximity with a narcissist for several years that was actually the catalyst for me beginning to develop my own shadow. Because I was so naive and soft and agreeable and like, you know, go with the flow. That was my thing, bruh. Go with the flow. But the flow can lead you down a drain sometimes, man. And like, especially if you find a malevolent person who's just so ready to scoop you up and suck off your innocence like a parasite. There's people out there like that, man. And they reckon like 3% of the population belongs to one of those four categories, the dark tetrad. In another video, I'll tell you what to look for and how to deal with that in the moment too. Because that's another skill that you're not going to learn in school, but could literally save your life. So, see, here's the catch. Shadow repression isn't just a personal issue, because the men who refuse to face their shadow often end up being controlled by it. And if those kinds of men end up in positions of power, which they often do, right? Because they're willing to go that extra mile. They're willing to delve into morally questionable acts and behaviors in order to reach their means. You know, like if two people are equally driven and they're both ascending for the same thing, the dude who will do that dirty work that this morally upstanding citizen wouldn't do, he's the one that often takes the top. Now, whether or not that lasts, is a different story, because all true success is founded on relationships. And the dude who got on top by squashing everyone else down usually doesn't last long. And that pattern even shows up in chimps and stuff. Chimp gangs. I don't know the word for that, but the leader chimp isn't always the biggest and the strongest. You might think that it would be the one that can just lay a beating on anyone who disagrees with him, but normally the leader is the one who has the best relationships, who's the most reciprocal, who's like the center of the community. A true alpha, right? We love this on YouTube, right? The alpha male. The higher value male. The highest value male isn't the biggest and the baddest. He's the best with people. But he also should have a little bit of big bad in him. You know what I'm saying? Just a smidge. And this is what this integration of the shadow process can help bring out in a man. History's full of tyrants. Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot. That's kind of an extreme example of what can happen when this darkness isn't integrated correctly, when it just takes over. Because it's an art, bro. It's like everything, boys. Everything. Every video I make, I realize I'm always trying to be the advocate for the middle passage. The middle way. There is a middle way. Purple pill or nothing. I want to take a quick side route just to discuss the big 5 personality traits, because one of them specifically relates to this very subject. So the big 5 personality traits, real quick. Openness to experience. That's super creative people. Think Hendrix, Van Gogh, Tarantino, you know, I don't know. Conscientiousness. So that's discipline, dutifulness, responsibility, organization. Think like David Goggins, right? Extroversion, which just refers to an individual's ability to be sociable and outgoing. Nathan from Misfits, Cook from Skins, busting out the old classics there. Or like I Show Speed, to bring it into the present day. Number 4 is neuroticism, which is like a person's tendency to experience negative emotions, basically. Being neurotic, right? In your head, thinking a lot, worrying a lot, stressing a lot. Think like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And the last is agreeableness. And that reflects a person's capacity to be compassionate, to be cooperative, to be empathetic towards others, right? If you're high in agreeableness, you're probably a warm person. In the Big 5 personality model, one stands out, right? And that's agreeableness, because it measures how cooperative and conflict avoidant you are. Highly agreeable people tend to be well liked, but also much more likely to be taken advantage of, to be underpaid, for example, to be overlooked, to be betrayed. Sometimes because there's no fear of consequence, right? Like that guy's a pushover. You can do whatever, you can say whatever you want to him. He won't do nothing. He's like Ned Flanders. I'm a super agreeable person. But again, boys, you gotta have a little something to you, like a line, say. Something's gotta happen when that line's crossed. There has to be a little resistance from you. Otherwise, you don't have boundaries, right? You just have preferences. And people just dance over that like it's a joke. So the opposite, obviously, is disagreeableness. And when refined, it isn't cruelty, it's assertiveness. Saying, no, that's unacceptable. No, I'm not going to let you do that to me. Sorry. Or not, you know. I think we're seeing a cultural decline in this capacity, especially amongst young men. So let's get practical. How can you begin to integrate the shadow? In my opinion, a man has to be strong physically. It's not about the muscles. It's not even about being physically imposing per se. You don't have to walk around like it. You don't have to yap about it all day. You don't have to call people out and be like intentionally disagreeable just to have an opportunity to express that physicality. It's just like, you know, if someone tries to take you out, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Probably. I'm not saying that if you're a little bit built, it's impossible to get your ass whooped. For one, on a deep level, you know that you're kind of ready physically for whatever may come, just because you're fit, right? But secondly, you're less likely to even get tried in the first place. A good rule of thumb is to be either strong enough to win in a conflict or fast enough and fit enough to run away if it happens. If you're on that kind of baseline level of physicality, you're in a good place. Learning martial arts is huge. You're not going to be like Canelo out there, but it's more just the situational awareness, knowing what it's like to get hit, knowing what it's like to get gassed out in a fight, knowing where your limits are in that way, knowing the basics. You could create a solid foundation in 1 year. And if you want to speed up the process, why not sign up to a fight? Because that'll lock you in with a tenacity that you won't exactly get just from showing up and hitting pads and stuff. When you put something on the line, and this rule goes for everything, when you put it on the line, you bring out more of yourself. More of you is forced to rise to the occasion. Or fail. But even in the failure, the learning lessons are greater. That's another rule of thumb, man. If you want to win, if you want to grow, if you want to evolve, put something on the line. Spend your money. Put your pride on the line. Sign on the dotted line. Commit to it for real, in writing, publicly. And then it's like, well, do I show up or do I not? You know? Another big part of integrating the shadow that I found so helpful was like learning about your emotions, the things that go on inside of you. For me, I've kept the journal every day for like 6 years. So I understand myself. Does not mean I'm perfect. And like, it doesn't mean that I'm like some holy hyper-aware Buddha sitting under a tree. But there's not a lot of questions as to the whys. I know the whys behind my behavior now. I've got the evidence there. I've witnessed the patterns play out in real time. Throughout years, I've got the data. For me now, it's just about applying what I know I already need to do. And so that's why journaling and like meditative practices, taking the time to explore your inner world, to learn about yourself is so important, right? This is like shining the spotlight inside. What do we got there? What's behind here? What's under the mat? Ooh, a snake. I think that's a very important part of this process. Another big one is learning to navigate conflict. And this remains the most difficult for me. As I said, my natural instinct is like, that's your perspective, I have my perspective, no worries, you know. I'm not usually super down to debate someone. If we disagree, we disagree. But sometimes, and specifically in relationships with your family, with your girl, with your partner, things can't be avoided. You can't conflict avoid your way out of something. There's no other way but through. You just have to talk it through. Learning to speak clearly and think clearly when you're like emotionally vulnerable or emotionally volatile. It's a very important skill. Another big one is like define your values. What matters to you? And these usually come organically just through life. Establishing your values is important. You can sit down and think about this and write it. And you can also kind of pay mental note as you go about life and just kind of mentally jot these things down. This becomes like what you're about. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe. Learning to commit to the truth is another big one. Like, oh, that's hard, bro. It's hard. Tie yourself closely to the truth. You're going to have to face conflict. Because history speaks for itself. Censorship, insanity abroad. It remains. Truth is the first casualty of war. Where the measure of calamity, tragedy endured, is the reflection of how much its people passively ignored. Cold exposure and breath work, building physical resilience and embodiment practices, getting into your body, feeling it down in your plums. Special 2 plums for 1. Reading biographies of great men, reading great books. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is a great place to start because that was a book written by the Emperor of Rome thousands of years ago. And it was like his personal diary. He never expected anyone to read it, much less for it to become a best-selling book of all time. Seeing his perspective, and it just reflects like, wow. He was facing the same exact issues that we face today as the emperor of the greatest empire on earth at that time. It's pretty incredible stuff, man. That's a book you can buy from the bookshop. You know, you have access into the mind of an emperor. I'd highly recommend that one. Fasting as well, like stoic practices. Teaching yourself denial, willpower. Going without. Learning not to always reach for something, you know. Learning to fill that hole in us, which we all kind of have a little bit, at least. Learning to fill that with healthy practices, with self-worth, through discipline and commitment. That's huge. And lastly, as important as any, is brotherhood. Being with men in competitive environments is really good too. That's another reason why getting into a martial arts gym, starting boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, something like that, it's just really good. You can't replicate that energy of that competitive spirit that comes out. It's like body to body, willpower to willpower. It's like a physical church, sanctuary. All right, people, I'm going to wrap this one up. Listen, the hero's journey isn't always about slaying a dragon out there. You know, oftentimes, man, that dragon is within us. The boy avoids the shadow, the man confronts it. Jung called this process individuation, the process of becoming a true individual. Not a product of society, not a clone of the culture, but someone who knows who they are, what they stand for, and what they will and won't tolerate. If you want to be whole, you can't just be good. You need to be strong. Men who have faced themselves and come back with something solid, something grounded, something embodied, something unbreakable, and therefore choose not to harm others. That is the task before us, boys. Face your shadow, reclaim your edge. These were some of the core lessons of my young adulthood, and I had to learn a lot of this the hard way, so I hope you take it on board. I hope that this resonates with you and that it's something that you can integrate from this video and start upon your way on this venture. If you haven't already, maybe this is just a good reminder. Don't forget to like and subscribe. With every like, I grow in power. I'm really finding a flow with this stuff now, and I'm loving it. And I hope you're enjoying the content. Until next time, boys and girls. Namaste. We love you long time. Peace.